please click like on this video. Share it on social media if you would, because we really love that, and so does the algorithm. And of course, subscribe to the channel, because Madpropsaero is nothing without you. This is a Cessna 152. One of the truly great training and personal aircraft ever designed. The little brother of the Cessna 172, the best-selling airplane of all time, the 152 is traditionally used as a two-seat trainer, a little bit as a personal aircraft. You can fly it from coast to coast, from the East Coast to the West Coast or back again. It's a terrific airplane. It doesn't use a lot of fuel. It's very docile. It's easy to fly, and it can be updated. One of the other advantages of the 152 is everywhere you go, the mechanic knows how to work on it, and there are parts available. But like all airplanes, it has some quirks that you have to adapt to if you're going to fly it safely. And one of them has to do with the pitot system, and I'll bet it's something you've never thought about. Our pitot tube provides ram air pressure to the airspeed indicator. That's a primary component of what gives us our indicated airspeed. It does it by comparing that ram air pressure to the static air pressure that we get here at the static port, the ambient air pressure. The difference between those two is indicated airspeed, and that's what we often use when we're flying to establish a cruise speed, a climb out, and landing. Now this is where we have to get a little bit thoughtful. Climbing out, no big deal. Cruise speed, it's absolutely okay. But landing, there's a potential issue when we're landing in a Cessna 152 or a 150 series because there's only one static port. Right here on the left side of the fuselage is the only static port on the aircraft. And you say, so what? I only need one static port. Well, you'll find in a lot of aircraft there's another one on the opposite side, or there's an alternate static source inside the cockpit. Those have their own issues, but when we've only got one on one side, I want you to think about what happens if we do a forward slip to a landing. A normal procedure, I do it all the time. I kind of like slips rather than flaps. But if I do that, I have to be aware how that slip is affecting the relationship of the pitot system and how that affects the indicated airspeed I'm seeing on my panel. Think of it this way. If I was to do a slip in this airplane with right rudder, so my nose goes right, and left aileron, I'm going to be presenting this side of the fuselage to the oncoming wind. That means the static port is getting a little bit of ram air pressure. How much depends on how severe the slip is, but there is some ram air pressure going into the static port. Because of that, it's compressing the difference between the pitot tube and the static port reference, and our airspeed indicator is going to indicate slightly lower than we're actually flying. Our airspeed is actually a little higher than the indicator tells us it is. That's not such a big deal. Maybe we'll float a little more than we thought, but if we're pretty close on airspeed and we're doing everything right, it shouldn't make a significant difference. On the other hand, if I was to slip with left rudder and right aileron, I'm putting the other side of the fuselage into the oncoming wind, which creates a low pressure center over here, expanding the difference between the static source and the pitot source. What that means is your airspeed is actually lower than the indicator is telling you. Now, normally that's not going to be a big problem. Hopefully you're shooting your approach at best glide or a little bit above it. Maybe you've added 5 knots for a gust factor. But if we were to make a bit of a mistake, if we were to get slow on that base to final turn with our slip in, and we should stall, a stall while uncoordinated is a classic setup for a spin accident. And if we were to enter that spin at 700 feet or 500 feet, it's probably not recoverable. So while forward slips to landing are absolutely normal, it's a reasonable thing to do. You'll probably do it on your check ride. You may even do it on your flight reviews with CFIs. You want to be aware, how is the construction of your airplane affecting the information you're getting off the panel when you're doing normal procedures. For as much as I love the 152 and the 150 series, and I do, I've flown them for years, I think they're great. If you're flying a slip to a landing, be aware of which way you're slipping and how that affects the airspeed indicator. Stall spin accidents in or around the pattern are not rare in aviation, unfortunately. and they're often fatal. So we want to do everything we can to avoid putting ourselves in that position. Just be aware of how that slip might be affecting your airspeed indicator as opposed to the actual airspeed of the aircraft. And remember, when you're uncoordinated, there is a risk for the stall. So maybe keep the airspeed just a tad higher than you were shooting for on the airspeed indicator. The worst thing that will happen is you're a little bit fast and you float. But the best thing that will happen is you won't stall and enter a spin at low altitude. I know that's a weird topic, but I appreciate you listening to me on it. It's one that's always been at the back of my mind, and I think it's worth talking about. And most CFIs either don't know about it or don't ever discuss it with their students or clients. It's worth talking about. With that in mind, thanks so much. Appreciate you coming by.